Welcome everyone to our daily broadcast on Kabbalah for Heretics with me, your host, Rebbe Yakov, Leib, HaKohain. It's of course Saturday, and on Saturday we have for many years now been basing our broadcasts on the Gnostic Gospels of the Nag Hammadi Library. This has been now for 15 or 20 years, every Saturday. And there are plenty of them to go through in that way, and we often go through some of them twice or more. For example, we've been going through the Gospel of Thomas for the past weeks, and this is, I think, the third or fourth time that we have gone through the Gospel of Thomas, and certainly not the last time. Let me see, where did I leave off? All right. Oh, this next one is really rather incredible. It's entry 29. Jesus said, "If the flesh came into being because of spirit, it is a wonder. But if spirit came into being because of the body, it is a wonder of wonders. Indeed, I am amazed at how this great wealth has made its home in this poverty." Now remember, this is not something somebody made up after Jesus. It's not something somebody remembered Jesus may or may not have said. It's something he actually said and that was written down as he said it. And it totally contradicts the current attempts to say, oh, no, Gnosticism is not against the body. No, it is against the body, rightfully so. Listen again to what he says. He says, if the flesh came into being because of spirit, it is a wonder. But if spirit came into being because of the body, it is a wonder of wonders. Indeed, he says, I am amazed at how this great wealth of the soul, the spirit, has made its home in this poverty of the body. Now, I realize this is very difficult to hear for many people because they want to extol the body. And of course, on a purely worldly level, the body's a great tool. There's no question about that. In one of the great works of the Oral Torah, it says the entire body exists for the sake of the brain. Well, and that's so because we would not be able to do anything without the body. So in that sense, the body has a value. But in a spiritual sense, as Jesus says, it's a marvel that such a wealth should take its place in such a poverty. Everything bad comes from the body. Oh no, the body can be beautiful and everything. Yeah, well, maybe, but look at what happens. Yes, all right. Sex is beautiful. Sex is wonderful. Oh, what a great experience. But when it's over, it's not. When it's over, what you're left with is the need to take a shower and a feeling of kind of emptiness. I hope I'm not losing listeners. But it's true. And like eating, which is also in the body, it's never satisfied. No matter how great the sex may have been at that moment. It ain't going to take long before you want it again. And not getting it again is going to make you very unhappy. Right? It's a great example of what the Buddha talks about with suffering comes, all of it comes from desire. Sexual desire, social desire, biological desire. Because when it's not being satisfied, when the desire is not being satisfied, you're acutely uncomfortable, you're suffering. When it is being satisfied, that's fine. But after that, it's just as strong a desire. You lose it, and when you lose something you've gained because you desire it, that's suffering. And that's always true of the body. This was the great contribution of Freud. I'm not saying anything Freud didn't say. So those of you who are listening and thinking of never listening again, remember, those of you in the New Age, Papa Freud was talked about the same thing. The root of all evil is sex, ultimately. Uncontrolled sex. Desire. And that's a poverty. Jesus is saying it. But the soul is very easily satisfied as long as you just acknowledge it. The spirit. The spirit never dies. It is energy. It can neither be created nor destroyed. But the body dies, and in the process of dying causes great suffering. Physically, psychologically, socially. I thank God in my case so far. Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, all of you up there. It is not working toward my destruction, but for most people it does. And yes, my body is the problem. You know, ultimately it always is. It is a poverty. We try to compensate for that psychologically by telling ourselves that it isn't so. But you can tell yourself it's not a poverty all you want, but it's still going to be a poverty. The couple of you who are here for the recording session, am I being clear? Am I getting through? Good. I don't want to offend anyone, and I don't want to alienate anyone because of this. Oh, you're a typical kind of Christian anti-sex. No, I'm not. I'm not at all. I beg to differ. I'm just calling a spade a spade. And furthermore, the greatest poverty of the body is that it is the ego. Ramana Maharshi tells us the body is the ego. So long as we're in the body, the ego is in control. The spirit is constantly struggling to wiggle out of the body. That's what Jesus is speaking of here. Think about it for a moment. Now, I know that one of the ways of coping with that is to say it isn't so. But the fact is, I believe, for me, that the soul feels trapped, confined, contaminated in the body. I know for a fact, I'll never forget, I think I've told this to you many times in the past. Many years ago, back in the, it must have been the early 70s. I was just sitting in a little restaurant having a veggie burger, and out of nowhere, I literally heard and felt the soul in me begging me to release it. Honest to God. And at that moment, I knew, my God, that's what's going on. In the middle of eating a veggie burger, of all things. I wasn't practicing meditation. I wasn't um, being spiritual. I was, in fact, carousing with the body. I was stuffing my face with food, which probably is the reason why the soul took the opportunity to just say, please, I'm trapped in here. Now, people can consider that crazy. Oh, he hears voices. Well, consider it whatever you want, but it changed my life. It gave me greater understanding. And indeed, it points to the fact you've got to be constantly vigilant for when God is going to talk to you. He can even talk to you while you're stuffing your face with a veggie burger. You don't need to be meditating or chanting Om or doing some kind of ritual. He's always talking to you. The soul is constantly pleading with you. But just shut the fuck up and listen. I was listening at that time. That was the opening of my listening. My sadhana, my practice, my spiritual practice was very intense at the time, and continued to be for a number of years. But so it isn't surprising it happened to me at that time, because that was I was preparing myself for that kind of thing. But my point is that it's there for all of you. You're all getting the same message. You're just not listening. You're so busy eating the veggie burger. You're so busy satisfying the body, reveling in the taste and in the feelings of fullness and all of that, that you don't hear that little pathetic voice of the Spirit begging you to aid it in being released. That's the problem with enjoyment. Per se, there is nothing wrong with enjoying the world. As I recall, it was a delicious veggie burger. French fries and all that stuff. And I was enjoying it. But the problem with that is not in itself, but it can be such a distraction. You're so into it that you're not hearing the Spirit speaking. Or that you're into the enjoyment and not into the moment. This is where it becomes difficult, because of course if you're going to be enjoying something, enjoy it. I'm not by any means saying you shouldn't enjoy what you're eating. I was enjoying it plenty. The thing of it was that I had learned not to allow my physical enjoyment to totally distract me from my spiritual inner life. And I'm not saying I'm a big deal because of that. I'm not saying I'm some great saint because of that. I'm saying I can do it, so can you. I'm not saying be like me. You have to hear me carefully now. I'm not saying be like me. I'm saying if you want the kind of experiences that I have had and that presumably spiritual people want, here's how I've gotten them. And the way I've gotten them is not something I made up. I've gotten them under the guidance of my spiritual masters. And I don't mean under the guidance of a master who I just simply go to his lectures to hear or whose books I read. I'm talking about men I sat with for years, being spiritually directed. Swahananda and Kirsch, mainly. You shouldn't have too many masters. So Jesus says, if the flesh came into being because of the Spirit, it's a wonder. But if the Spirit came into being because of the body, it is a wonder of wonders. Indeed, I am amazed at how this great wealth of the Spirit has made its home in this poverty of the body. Now, this isn't teaching we should all become dried up old Puritans. Not at all. It's simply saying we have to go beyond the enjoyments of the body. We have to go beyond them to what it is that underlays them. The senses, which is what's being talked about here, the senses, touch, taste, feel, they are not the Spirit. They are the mechanisms of the body by which the Spirit can be experienced. But we have to learn to enjoy them in that way. Even sex. We've often talked about sacred sexuality, enjoying fully the experience of sex, but doing it within a sacred context. Huh? The point is to lead not so much a holy life as far as I'm concerned, but a sacramental life. The sacramental life, I call it. To lead a sacramental life where everything we do, everything we touch, everything we smell and taste and move about, we make a sacrament to God. We release the holiness from it back to God. The point of having the orgasm in sex is not just to have a good orgasm, which is, as I'm sure we all know, pretty pleasant, but to also release the sparks that are in it back to God. To go beyond the purely animal satisfaction of sex. To go beyond the purely animal satisfaction of eating. Not to replace it, but to go beyond it. When you're sharpening a pencil, imagine that you're releasing sparks of holiness from that pencil and raising it up to God. When you're chewing on your food, imagine that with each chew you're releasing the nitzot from that food and raising them back up to God. When you're having sex and an orgasm comes upon you, realize that you are raising up that energy back to God. And everything you do, therefore, becomes sacramental. Taking a piss becomes sacramental. If you make it sacramental. Or you can allow the body to pursue its own enjoyments for the sake of its own enjoyments. Many people do that. My problem with that is the ones who do that and then want to spiritualize that somehow by saying that the act itself is spiritual. No, the act itself is not spiritual. It can be made spiritual. The act of eating in itself is not spiritual. It is animal, which is fine. But we can make it spiritual at the very moment of eating. We can add a dimension to it, a spiritual dimension. The act of sex is not in itself sacramental. We can make it sacramental while we are doing it. That's sometimes called theurgy or magic with a K. The next statement, statement 30, is also remarkable. I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to get into it, but we will get into it next Saturday. Statement 30, Jesus said, where there are three gods, they are gods. Where there are two or one, I am with them. Hey, hello. Jesus says, where there are three gods, they are gods. Hello? Polytheism. And by the way, next Saturday we will look into the Psalms where it constantly talks about more than one God. On that note, we'll end for this Saturday. Let me mark my poor my poor copy of the Gnostic Gospels is so marked up. There's no room to mark it anymore. Here we go. Okay. Now I will end the broadcast as I've been ending all the broadcasts, and will continue ending the broadcast for the next year by reciting the Kaddish, the ritual prayer for the dead, in honor of the soul of our departed beloved friend and tzaddik, Leonard Cohen. Yiskadal v'yiskadal shmei rabo, bomo divrach Yerusei v'yamlich machusei, b'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei l'kol beis Yisrael, b'galo u'vizman kori v'imnu amen. Yehei shmei rabo mevirach le'olam u'me'omaya. Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yisba'ar v'yisomam v'yisnasei v'yisadar v'yisalei v'yisalau. Shmei d'kutsha b'richu. Le'olam mincha b'irachasa v'shirasa toshvachasa v'nechemasa. Damiron b'amo v'imnu amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya. V'chayinu aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'imnu amen. Osei shalom b'mramav hu ya'asei shalom. Aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'imnu amen. Go in peace. The broadcast this morning is over. Shalom. Please God, I will see all of you.